A town covered in dust and aged in tragedy. A beautiful little roadside historic town. Southwest Utah. Come along and explore Rockville and Grafton Ghost Town. Welcome everyone to Weekend Escapades. Okay, we are headed down SR9 towards Zion to share a very interesting town of Rockville. And right now we are stopped at Fort Zion. As you can see right behind me, we have an old water wagon and the fort. And we're going to head on in and share this location with you before we head to Rockville. Looks like grapevines. Well, I'll tell you, haven't seen a lot of grapes and grapevines out in this area, but Fort Zion has plenty of them right here in front. You know about gift shops, you always find something of interest. There's always something unique in each one. We got a few of the old cigar store Indians here. The carvings. Even a little one down there. And right next to it, the cowboy statue. And he's enjoying a stogie as well.
Never underestimate the power of them stupid people in large numbers. Unless, of course, you're one of them unfortunate fellers. In that case, we like to say ignorance is bliss. Come on back, you hear, and let Pappy tell you more.
We got a fortune from Pappy, and what it says on the back is, stop worrying about what's beyond your control. And I gotta agree with old Pappy. I think that makes sense. All right, so we're headed outside to feed the animals, and of course, we had to grab a quick sarsaparilla in an old West fort. That's what you drink. Now they've got a facade of an old saloon, a hotel, a jail, and a couple other buildings with the covered wagons, and the petting zoo. That's great for the kids. Well, and me too, because I'm a big kid. Our little granddaughter came on this adventure, and she learned how to pump water into an old water trough. All right, enough about old Fort Zion. We're headed through Rockville. And to get through Rockville to Grafton Ghost Town, you'll see there, for the love of dog, drive slow. And there's an alien over the bridge, this iconic little bridge, as you have to go over the Virgin River to get to Grafton Ghost Town. We're going to do a little deeper dive and take a little hike to the river and see how far it was away from Grafton, because it flooded a tremendous amount and made it difficult for those pioneers. And I always want to check here on this house because they have been restoring it and building on this for a while. And we're going to head on in. One of the things I love about the old buildings is just the construction in general. You can see these walls. Oh my gosh, I can't even hardly see in here with the sunglasses on. But the way that they do the plaster and the rough cut timber. And you can see they're restoring the doors kind of back with the original style hinges. The thing about a location like this is they preserve it and they take care of it, but you want to make sure that you leave everything the way you found it. If the door's closed, be sure it's closed. What a great job they've done to preserve it towards its original state. So Grafton being a real ghost town, being that it was a town and the buildings are still here, some, but nobody lives in them anymore. They have a couple of events out here. Grafton's kind of an icon as it's built in this valley, and it was a very treacherous town to live in. At one time it was built and it flooded. It was about a mile away they built, and then they built again after it was flooded. And it was attacked by Native Americans multiple times. Many people lost their lives to these tragedies. So the stories about Grafton are fairly tragic, and that's why it is a ghost town, and people decided to move out of here because just too much happened to the settlers. So the mid-1800s were a tough time to survive, especially in this desolate countryside. Some deaths occurred from disease such as tuberculosis and others from accidents. The mortality of the youth was at a high rate back then, especially infant mortality. And the graves of the young and the infants are scattered amongst the older residents in the Grafton Cemetery, which is one of the most interesting cemeteries we have found in the ghost towns that we've been to. And that's going to come up here in just a little bit. But right now, let's continue the tour of this amazing location. Okay, Grafton, Utah, Ghost Town. So here in Grafton, what happened, why they left, was because it was bare and limited to acreage and loss of fields from repeated floods. Grafton men helped to build a canal and delivered Virgin River water to a wide bench 20 miles downstream. When the Hurricane Canal was finished in 1906, many of Grafton's families packed everything, some even their houses, and moved to Hurricane, Utah. And without enough children to warrant a school and lacking culinary water and electricity, Grafton gradually became a ghost town, and that is what we see today. So this is the schoolhouse church. It was built in 1896. The Grafton settlers were building this schoolhouse, or finished building the schoolhouse in 1886. And the two-story walls stand on lava rock. And the foundations are quarried from a nearby hillside. So this was literally built locally here in the area. And it is a substantial building. See, the windows are bowing out just a little bit. I mean, it's been here for years and still in great condition. And the bell is still in, I guess, the bell tower. So the beams and the wood used to build this church were taken from Mount Trumbull. And that's nearly 75 miles away. And it's they were hauled all the way across the Arizona Strip. What a tough ride and trek that would be to get the wood to build this building. Now, there were stairs right there against the side of the building, but they've removed them. So now we really can't even look in the windows of the church where we used to be able to. You'd stand right there. But I'm tall and the camera can reach in the window. Hopefully you can see what's going on in there. Last time we were here, there was really nothing but a bunch of flies in the windowsills. But they do open this up during the Grafton days and let people look inside and around. But again, they have taken the stairs down. This is the Alonzo H. Russell home. This was circa 1862. Alonzo Haverton Russell built this adobe home. So it was adobe style around 1962 and lived here until 1910. Following Alonzo's death in 1910, his son Frank bought the house for $200 and a cow. The home last residents moved out into St. George in 1945. Last time we were here, these little signs weren't here. This was the people and places of Grafton. You can see there was a building right next to the church and school that we saw. It says Teacher Ella Wood stands in her class in Grafton circa 1906. So there's reference to the fact that this sled and this barrel was used for taking down to the river and washing the clothes. They'd hitch up a horse and drag that down there. If the water was clear enough, they'd wash their clothes. Up these stairs is where pioneers used to roam. Well, I'll tell you, you can't get much older building as large as this preserved and kept from falling down, because these are just brick walls and sandstone foundations. Again, they've rebuilt them, which is great, but it's still an old building. The condition is great. I just get excited about it because you kind of really feel it when you're here, how old these buildings are. And maybe you can hear the excitement in my voice or see it on my face because I love old buildings and the old history that's around here. And again, Utah is just no slouch. It's just full of it. And they've done a great job of preserving it. A lot of the places we go to in Nevada, you know, even in some in Utah, but in the desert, there's a tremendous amount of buildings that are just dilapidated. The ghost towns, you can see what was there, but they've let the walls fall down and like they don't even care about it because it was a lost history for quite a few years. Now people are starting to preserve them and bring them back, but some of them it's just too late. It's just stones. You'd have to reconstruct it from the ground up. Be like new construction. And we're gonna head down to the river, the Virgin River, which is just right down here beyond the trees. See how close we can get if it's not fenced. There's a little trail, but again, I don't know how far down it goes. Yeah, so there's a gate down here to take us down to the river. Now this is the river where they would get, of course, their water, come down here to play or fish or whatever. And the Native Americans also traveled this. There was a tremendous amount of turmoil between the Native Americans and the settlers. And those stories exist in the graveyard for sure. So this is obviously river bottom, maybe when it floods or gets a lot of water, but we're getting closer to the river, but it seems to me that it's a lot further away than I thought it was. But just kind of, you can see it's marshy. I'll show you the ground where it's been very wet. The leaves are trampled. You got stuff like this in your way. But really want to see how close that river is because they experienced so much flooding here. Sorry if I'm kind of tripping up. There's a lot of wood and things on the trail. See down there, you got to step over. It'll hang you up. Bridge for sure, about 3 feet high to get through here to try and find that water. See exactly how close it runs to Grafton. So we're alongside of the buildings. You can see them right here in the distance. Kind of a nice backdrop, an angle I haven't seen before because we haven't really chased the river's edge when we were here. So keep on trekking through it to get there. As we're walking through here, we can see that this is extremely sandy soil, because this is all river bottom where we're at when it floods. And so it runs through here and it covers everything with silt. And there's just this little path. It doesn't look like many people have been on this path, but hey, we're determined to find that river's edge.
So I don't have a date on this photo, but that river right behind that church and school is where we are walking, but the water isn't there now, it's further out.
Squirrel. Squirrel out in the middle of a riverbed. He's running. All right, walking carefully through the bushes, we have found the river. And it's right here. Doesn't look real clear. As you can see, the sandy banks, a lot of ants. And then it's nestled right in all these beautiful mountains. And you can see how this could flood with runoff coming from Zion. So Zion Park is right there. That's the mouth of it. And when that water comes through there with all that stone, flash flooding, you could see where this would take the old pioneers and just wipe out their homesteads and their farmlands. The Virgin River. So out here in the middle of nowhere, outside of Grafton, you can see that an old frame to a vehicle's out here. There's a wheel over there even. You just never know what you're gonna find. Well, look at that. There's part of the frame and the wheel's still attached to it. Who knows what that would be? See the way the frame was made. Okay, so I found a partner to go trekking from the river through the woods. And it was a little bit rough for her to be walking down this trail, so she's piggybacking with us.
Hi.
Because, say hi.
The cow was dangerous. This is me.
So she's heading through Grafton.
Yeah.
Learn a little bit about old pioneer history. Back through the woods of doom. My goodness, these things are so low. And stickery. Almost back. So on this little trek down to the river, you can just imagine, because that barrel we saw inside the home was actually a barrel that they used to put the laundry in, and they would pull it down to the river when the river ran clear to wash their clothes, because if it was a muddy river, it wouldn't do them any good. But my gosh, what a long ways down for pioneers to be able to do. Everything was so difficult, it makes you really appreciate what we have today. It makes you realize we probably don't need everything we have today. A little bit of cactus, quite a bit of trees, and a little bit of pioneer history. Okay, so we have one more home to see over here, Marie Russell Home, and this was built in 1879. Let's explore that. I find the chimney on this place amazing, and the construction, the rough cut timber, the way they put it together like a log cabin. But you'll see what I'm saying. So I really like to see the details of how something is built, because it shows how much manual labor goes into it, and that gives you an appreciation of how people lived on this harsh land. This area was extremely cold in the winter and snow, and extremely hot and desert-like in the summertime. There's a story with Grafton about 2 young girls that perished from swinging from a tree. It's a horrible story. but one that's true in Grafton. Now, whether this is the tree or not, there used to be a swing that was here, but you could see that would be a perfect tree for a swing, and you can see it's a little bit more worn right there. Maybe this is the tree where that happened, but there are plenty of large trees in Grafton for that to happen. But that actually happened in this town of Grafton. Look at that beautiful shot of the old church and school and the beautiful home right there. So this is the front of this home. Cabin is what I call it. You can see how it was built. I'll tell you, that is a bulletproof house right there. That is 8 to 10 inch thick walls, solid timber. Look at the size of them. And this is that chimney that I was talking about. And they've covered it with the stone that it was made out of, extremely large stones. We got a little patchwork to do right there. You can see how easy it would be to knock a hole in your wall. Let's just start our tour of this location in the back where the old sheep's barn was. Now you can see a lot of the timber in this was the original, and some of it of course newer, but they've reconstructed the way that it existed. You can see the older timbers that held it up, and a lot of the wood that's here is older, but they've put some new stuff on the roof to make sure they preserve it. You can see it would have had 2 stalls in it, kept the livestock, because you had to have a place to keep them so they didn't freeze in the wintertime. A lot of people kept some of them in the house because they would freeze out in the wild and get a heavy wind and a lot of snow and a solid freeze, and those animals might not make it. Let's go in through the back door this time. This is like the back porch or just a room. Maybe this was the kitchen area where a stove would have gone through right here. And I hear somebody that just joined us. There she is. You can see the way the walls were built, so the beams that would go through.
Papa, be careful hitting your head.
Thank you.
Papa, just stuck.
I will for sure. I hit my head here last time.
Oh wait, this is mine.
So this house is, to me, is super exciting because of the way it's put together. But like a back room or a porch add-on, right? So you have the stone wall here. So maybe like a mud room or a porch and add on to this piece. Because there's the outside wall for the house. And of course the stone side over here. So a lot of it. So this is probably added on as well. So the original house would have been here. And look at how low this is. So my head, literally my head is here on these, right about the height of these beams. And they say it's because most people, the pioneers, had more of a bread diet, like wheat. And they didn't have the protein, the meat and the milk and things. And so they grew to an average. I think the men were like 5'6", and the women were in the low 5 foot area, like 5'2". And so a lot of the pioneer, historians and some of the stuff that we're seeing in the museums, we're saying that that was the average height of them. And you can see it here because I literally cannot stand up in this living room. Oh, I take that back. I am standing up and I'm touching the ceiling. So about 6'4" is the height of the ceiling. But last time I was here, I was walking in and nailed my head right on this bad boy. And that hurt. So imagine if they wore cowboy hats, they'd hit them on the entrance to the door, so you better take off your cowboy hats to get in there. But again, you can see the construction and how they tied these together. The beams for the roof, which is fairly genius compared to the other homes. These are solid beams going through the roof. And then stone with a little storage area up top, a little, I guess, attic space. Love the construction. As we're standing here, you can see there's a whole flock of turkey out there, wild turkeys, right next to the cattle. You don't see wild turkey every day, but hey, we see them today. So this is the Grafton Cemetery. And it says that there's 74 to 84 graves that exist in Grafton Cemetery. That also includes Southern Paiute people who worked or lived alongside early settlers, but many of the headstones are missing.
Now, we need to be aware of the fact that Grafton was repeatedly abandoned by settlers, and because of its inhospitable environment illness, severe elements, and Indian attacks, it made this town lethal for most of its inhabitants. And this cemetery is where a lot of them were laid to rest. And as it's known, the many tragedies and tragic deaths that happen here, it should come as no surprise that many visitors and people in the area have reported hearing and seeing strange things here. Now, these 3 wooden headstones here represent the Yorks, and tragedy struck this town in February of 1866 when 6 people died from diphtheria. The York family lost 3 children, ages 10, 5, and 3, and in January, Sarah Ann Brookfield and her 2 daughters, ages 5 and 7, also perished from the disease in February. Now, this large plot here, surrounded in all this ornate wood, is the plot of Robert M. Berry, his wife Isabella Hales Berry, and Robert's brother Joseph S. Berry. They were all killed by an Indian attack on April 2nd, 1866. On the road to Rockville, on the way out of Grafton, we found this little donkey burro. Well, it's cute anyway, looking at all these fantastic views. Heading into Rockville, let's go. So right here in Rockville, right at the beginning of town coming from Zion, so this will be the east side of Rockville, you can see a tremendous amount of fruit trees and fresh produce locally grown. Let's take a look. This is fascinating because my grandfather in Orange County, California owned a fruit stand. You can see it's Hirsch Produce. You got everything from zucchini all the way to eggplant. And it looks like a lot of that fruit was grown right on those trees. So I think I'm going to buy some of these plums and get a couple of apples that are over there. So when you buy them, you just grab your bag, put it over here, and we're going to pay with cash and slide it right in there. Of course, you could Venmo, but hey, cash always works. Let's take a look at the apples. Yes, please. So funny, the fruit baskets that are back there to pick the produce with, as I remember using those with my grandfather back in Southern California years ago to be able to pick produce out of the fields. Mostly was tomatoes and a lot of oranges. There's the bags of produce and the $7 going in. And we're gonna have ourselves some delicious fresh produce. So Rockville proper, we are right here downtown. You can see there's some nice older homes, and this one, it looks like they've got the old churn there where you would pump water or whatever. You put a horse on there and turn that and dry the water, but they put it on an old stump of an oak tree. And of course, the wagon in the yard. And this is small town America. That's what you're getting right here at the mouth of Zion. Now, Rockville got its name basically at a meeting in Grafton on December 13th, 1860. When that meeting was held in Grafton, the name was appropriated because of the large number of boulders that had come off the hills behind the town site. And there's a tremendous amount of hills here I'll share with you. But it was actually settled in 1862 when Mr. Huber built a home, and it became the first settler in the town. So he became the first settler by building a home in this town. There's a lot of rock buildings or stone buildings, but behind these homes, we're going to try to get back there on the side street. There are a tremendous amount of large boulders and right in the yards of these houses, and there's still a tremendous amount on the hillsides. This road is very active right next to me. We're right on the street, and that's the road to Zion. This is the west entrance to get in, as you can see, all the way down the road, and that is the road to go to Grafton right there. Here's one of the stone houses that I was talking about. It's a beautiful old home. Like I say, there's many of them. They're tucked away. And there's the hillside where the stones would come down, the boulders, as you can see.
Rockville boulders in the backyards of those homes. And I'll get a closer view as we drive up to these houses. We're gonna see it, but there's where the boulders would come from on this hillside. And there's some huge ones back over there behind that house as well. You can see they've done the front of these buildings. They're old buildings that were here, and this one was actually just not long ago when we were here, was fairly roughed out, and they've redone them. There's people in there working right now, making it beautiful. But that was all roughed out, and they finished the outside of that building. And look at the old church right here. Beautiful Rockville clock in front. We'll get a close-up of that. It doesn't look like it's telling time, but it says right on it, Rockville established 1862. This is a beauty right here. Now that is a fairly old building. There's a placard right in front of it where this bell's at. Unless you get out of the car and you stop in these small towns, and there's not much side street parking, so you really got to get into it. This is the F.G. Wagman Estate, 1912 Rockville Schoolhouse. There it is. And that's the old bell. I rang it. I did it. I'll probably get in trouble for that. Had to do it. Beautiful Rockville Schoolhouse. And I imagine they rang that bell to call those kids to school. Rockville, Utah. It's a good example of why they called it Rockville. As you can see the size of those boulders that are falling right behind those houses right there. Now obviously they were falling and they're in the yards of those houses, but are they still going to fall? And that's the question I have if you're living in Rockville. Do you have to worry about the boulders still falling? I mean, they don't look like they're too worried about it, because there's even some new houses that are back in there. Here's a gem. Hopefully you can capture how rustic that house is. You can see it used to have a railing and a porch, just like the houses we had in our last video. And a classic old home door right up on top. Looks like they might be remodeling that one. Just like the cabin we saw up in Grafton, which is literally right behind this town, next to the Virgin River. This looks like an old pioneer home, the way it was built. I'll show you the other side. You can see it there, the way it's designed. Right on the side. Oh my God. Just walked through a bunch of mud, water leaking. Just about slipped. Super slick. Felt like I was walking on ice. Look at that, the way they've built it. Beautiful. Just like a Grafton home, the construction.
Now Rockville is yet another beautiful southern Utah town from the 1800s. And right over here behind these bed and breakfasts are those giant boulders that we were talking about that roll down these hills. And they're almost as big as the houses that are built there. We hope you enjoyed this visit to Grafton, Utah, and Rockville, and of course, Fort Zion. But until our next adventure, goodbye from Weekend Escapades, and we'll see you in the next one.